The billionaire froze so suddenly that the entire restaurant seemed to stop breathing with her. Her 8-year-old daughter, who had not spoken a single word aloud in nearly 3 years, had just looked across the crowded daytime cafe, smiled at a tired single father, and whispered the one word everyone had been waiting years to hear, "Hi." The father looked up from the little paper airplane he was folding for his 6-year-old son, completely unaware that the woman standing behind him was one of the most powerful billionaires in the country. He was even less aware that the small girl staring at him had been examined by specialists, therapists, and doctors across 3 states, all of whom had failed to understand what had locked her voice away. And when the billionaire finally learned who this ordinary-looking single dad really was, the discovery would force her to confront a painful truth about money, grief, judgment, and the kind of courage that cannot be bought. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you can remain part of our family and our growing community. Her name was Celeste Harrington, a woman whose name appeared on skyscrapers, technology companies, charitable foundations, and financial magazines. At 39, she had built an empire after inheriting a struggling investment firm from her father and transforming it into one of the most influential private companies in America. Business magazines described her as fearless. Investors called her brilliant. Competitors called her ruthless. But none of those words meant anything when she looked at her daughter, Ren. Ren had once been a bright, endlessly curious little girl who asked questions about everything from clouds to butterflies to why people sometimes cried when they were happy. Then, when she was 5, something happened that changed her. Celeste had taken Ren to a charity event at a downtown hotel. During the event, a security emergency caused a frightening evacuation. Nothing happened to Ren physically, but the experience terrified her so deeply that she stopped speaking afterward. Doctors eventually called it trauma-related selective mutism, but Celeste never felt the diagnosis explained the emptiness she saw behind her daughter's eyes. She spent fortunes on specialists, private schools, therapists, and experimental programs. Nothing worked. Ren communicated through drawings, gestures, and a small notebook she carried everywhere. Celeste would have traded every building she owned for one ordinary sentence from her daughter. That afternoon, Celeste had reluctantly brought Ren to a quiet cafe because Ren's therapist believed exposing her to normal public environments might help her feel safe again. Celeste sat nearby, checking messages while Ren drew at a small table. Across the room, a man named Everett was trying to keep his son occupied while finishing a job application on his battered laptop. Everett looked nothing like the polished executive Celeste usually dealt with. His jacket was old, his boots were worn, and there were faint scars across one hand. His 6-year-old son, Milo, was building a paper airplane from a napkin, laughing every time it crashed into a sugar container. Everett smiled at him with the quiet patience of a father who had learned that children did not need perfection. They needed someone who stayed. When Milo accidentally sent the paper airplane flying toward Ren's table, Everett immediately stood, apologized, and walked over. He crouched beside Ren, retrieved the airplane, and instead of simply taking it away, he folded another one and left it gently on the edge of her table. Then he returned to his son without expecting gratitude. Ren stared at the paper airplane for several seconds. She looked at Everett. Then she looked at Milo. Something about the man's calmness seemed to reach a place that years of expensive therapy had never touched. Celeste noticed her daughter standing. She barely had time to react before Ren walked across the cafe. She stopped beside Everett, looked directly into his eyes, and whispered, "Hi." Everett froze. Milo froze. Celeste froze. Even the waitress stopped carrying a tray. It was such a tiny word, but to Celeste it felt louder than thunder. Her daughter had spoken. After nearly 3 years of silence, she had spoken to a stranger. Celeste rushed toward her, tears already filling her eyes, but Ren did something even more unexpected. She reached for Everett's hand. Celeste's first instinct was suspicion. She had spent years protecting Ren from anyone who might hurt her. She looked at Everett's worn clothes, his guarded posture, and the scars on his knuckles, and her mind immediately created a story about him. Maybe he was dangerous. Maybe he was unstable. Maybe he had some hidden reason for approaching her daughter. Everett seemed to recognize the fear in her expression and calmly stepped back. He told Celeste that he had not asked Ren to speak and had not even realized she was listening to him. He said sometimes children notice things adults overlooked. Celeste wanted to thank him, but her emotions were too tangled. She simply took Ren's hand and left. The next morning, Celeste expected Ren to return to silence. Instead, Ren wrote one sentence in her notebook: "The man with the paper airplane is safe." Celeste read it again and again. She began asking questions, carefully at first, then obsessively. Who was Everett Hayes? Why did he always scan a room before sitting down? Why did he position himself where he could see every entrance? Why did he seem uncomfortable when someone stood behind him? And why, when a tray suddenly crashed in a nearby cafe the following day, did Everett instinctively move between Milo and the sound before he even seemed aware he had done it? Celeste hired a private investigator, something she later regretted more than almost anything else in her life. The report came back 2 days later. Everett Hayes was a former Navy SEAL. He had served overseas on multiple deployments, including missions that were never publicly discussed in detail. His military record was decorated, but his life after service had been far less glamorous. Everett had left active duty after an operation in which several members of his team were killed. He carried physical scars, but the deeper wounds were invisible. After returning home, he had married his longtime girlfriend, Maren. They had Milo, and for a few precious years, Everett believed the worst part of his life was behind him. Then Maren died unexpectedly from a medical complication, leaving Everett to raise their son alone. Celeste read the report with growing shame. The man she had suspected of being dangerous had spent his life protecting people. The man she had judged by his old jacket had sacrificed years of his life for strangers he might never meet. But one detail in the report unsettled her even more. Everett had been honorably discharged after refusing to abandon an injured teammate during a mission. He had stayed behind under extraordinary circumstances, saving the man's life while putting his own at tremendous risk. Everett never received the kind of public recognition that followed billionaire philanthropists or decorated politicians. He simply went home, became a father, and tried to rebuild a life around the little boy who needed him. Celeste could not stop thinking about him. Not because of his military record, but because of the way he treated Milo. Everett did not try to make his son forget his mother. He kept Maren's photograph in a small frame on the kitchen shelf. He talked about her naturally, without turning her memory into something frightening. He taught Milo that missing someone was not weakness. It was proof that love had existed. That lesson struck Celeste harder than she expected because she suddenly realized that she had been teaching Ren the opposite. Celeste had spent years trying to protect her daughter from every painful memory, believing that if she could control the world around Ren, she could heal her. Instead, she had built a beautiful cage. A week later, Celeste invited Everett to a private charity event where she planned to fund a new children's trauma center. Everett almost refused. He did not want charity, and he did not want to become part of a billionaire's publicity campaign. But Ren had written his name in her notebook, followed by the words, "Please let him come." So he accepted. The event was held during the afternoon in a grand glass building overlooking the city. Politicians, investors, doctors, and celebrities filled the room. Celeste stood at the center, prepared to announce a multi-million-dollar donation. But before she could speak, Ren walked onto the stage. Celeste's heart nearly stopped. Ren had never voluntarily stood before a crowd. She took the microphone with trembling hands. Everett stood at the back with Milo, uncertain why he had been asked to attend. Ren looked toward him and then toward her mother. For several seconds, there was silence. Then Ren spoke. She did not say much. She simply said that she had been afraid for a long time. She said everyone had tried to make her talk, but nobody had asked her what she was afraid of. Then she looked at Everett and explained that when he folded the paper airplane, he had not asked her to speak. He had simply left it there and walked away. That made her feel safe because he did not need anything from her. Celeste began crying before her daughter finished. She realized that Ren had not needed another expert, another expensive program, or another carefully designed environment. She had needed someone who gave her permission to exist without demanding that she become someone else. Then Everett stepped forward. He did not take the microphone. He simply stood beside Ren. Celeste looked at him and finally apologized. She told him she had judged him before knowing him. Everett quietly admitted that he understood because people had judged him too. They had seen the scars and assumed violence. They had seen the military record and assumed fearlessness. Nobody understood that the bravest thing he had done after leaving the SEALs was learning how to pack his son's lunch every morning while fighting the urge to disappear into his own grief. Celeste offered Everett a position helping design the Children's Trauma Center, but Everett initially declined. He did not want a title. He wanted to help children who felt trapped inside their own fear. Celeste respected his decision and instead asked him to advise the foundation as a volunteer. Over the following months, Everett and Celeste developed a friendship built not on wealth or status but on honesty. Ren continued speaking, slowly at first, then more often. She began drawing paper airplanes everywhere. Milo became her closest friend, and Everett became the steady adult presence Celeste had never realized her daughter needed. But the greatest change happened inside Celeste. She stopped measuring love by how much money she could spend. She began sitting beside Ren without asking questions. She learned to listen when Ren wanted silence. She learned that protection did not mean removing every painful thing from a child's life. Sometimes protection meant teaching a child that pain could be survived. One afternoon, nearly a year after that first hi, Celeste returned to the same cafe with Ren. Everett and Milo were already there. Ren ran toward them, laughing, carrying a paper airplane she had made herself. Everett smiled as she handed it to him. Celeste watched the scene and felt something inside her finally settle. She had once believed the most valuable thing she could give her daughter was a life without fear. Now she understood that was impossible. The greatest gift was something different, the knowledge that even when fear came, Ren would never face it alone. Everett had entered their lives looking like an ordinary single father with a worn jacket and a tired smile. Behind that quiet exterior was a decorated SEAL, a grieving husband, a devoted father, and a man who had survived things most people could never imagine. Yet none of those achievements were what changed Ren's life. It was the simple kindness of folding a paper airplane and asking for nothing in return. Before the ending, tell us what you believe Ren truly needed that day, a doctor, a therapist, or simply someone who made her feel safe enough to be herself. Leave a meaningful comment and share the lesson you took from Everett's kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Because sometimes the person who changes a life does not arrive with wealth, fame, or promises. Sometimes they arrive carrying their own scars, quietly sit beside you, fold a little paper airplane, and show you that being safe does not mean the world will never hurt you. It means that when the world does hurt, someone will stay. And for Ren, that one simple hi became the beginning of a new life, while for Celeste, it became the moment she finally understood that the greatest fortune she could ever possess was not the empire she had built, but the people who had taught her how to love without trying to control what love could not prevent.